All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our Tuesday night healing. This is part 5 for us. Um, just give everybody just a quick second just to get in. I hope everybody's week is going good so far. I'm really excited to talk about tonight's topic with you. I'm going to invite Stormy real quick. You there?
Hello. I'm here.
All right. Okay. So, to get us started tonight, I hope everybody's week has been good so far. Tonight, we're going to be talking about anxiety and depression. And we're going to be doing things a little bit differently this week. Stormy's going to give us a kickoff with the definitions and stuff like that. And then we're going to dive into certain things around those topics, given experiences from both of our perspectives and such. And, we at that point will, open it up for questions and stuff if anybody wants to talk about anything in particular. So, Stormy, whenever you're ready, if you want to drop those definitions for us.
Okay, anxiety is apprehensive uneasiness or nervousness, usually over an impending or anticipated ill, a state of being anxious. The medical definition is an abnormal and overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear, often marked by physical signs such as tension, sweating, and increased pulse rate, but doubt concerning the reality and nature of the threat, and by self-doubt about one's capacity to cope with it.
Okay. So, to dive into that, I feel like on some level, most people have some form of anxiety. I know it is a disorder and stuff like that, that obviously is medicated because it can be extreme in a lot of cases. But, I feel like people get it confused when, they talk about and say, I have overwhelming anxiety about something because something big is coming up, or actually having like an anxiety condition. So, the feeling of worry and nervousness and unease and stuff like that, everybody goes through that. Everybody has those types of feelings. But, to have it on a regular basis, when you're having things like panic attacks per se, that's when it's in a little bit more of an extreme case. Now, as somebody who has suffered from panic attacks for most of my life, it's a scary thing. It can really be nerve-wracking, because you don't know what's happening all the time. It's very uneasy. So, for example, my first panic attack actually took place back in 2013. I was drinking with some friends and stuff like that, and the night before, me and a buddy were sharing a bottle of vodka back and forth, which was not unusual at that time for us to do. But the next morning, I woke up and something just felt off, and I let the day go by and everything was okay for a little while, maybe for a couple hours. And all of a sudden, as I was walking through the hallway, I felt like I was having a heart attack. And, obviously I've never had a heart attack before, but like just the feeling that I was feeling, that's exactly what it felt like, or what I would assume that it would feel like. So, I can't breathe. I'm like freaking out, and I'm like, telling them, I'm like, oh my God, like I think I need to go to the hospital. Like there's something wrong with me. Like what is this? Why is this happening to me? And it lasted for, I think, about 2 hours. And, I actually didn't go to the hospital. I actually wound up just, toughing it out and stuff like that. But ever since then, it just kept happening and happening. And usually when it would happen is like after a night of drinking. So, people talk about like anxiety, when you're hungover and you have anxiety and stuff like that. But then it started happening in, real time as well. When I wasn't drinking, it would turn into, I would be in a situation that I felt uncomfortable about, or maybe I was dreading something that was going to happen that day. And then I would be sitting there just like with that overwhelming weight, just like breathing down on me. And, I didn't know how to deal with it. But my ex, my child's mother, she suggested to me when we were together that I go talk to somebody about it and see if I can get some medication. So I went and I saw my primary doctor, and I explained to them what was going on, and they had told me that, we could give you clozapam. That should help. So I would take it. In the beginning, it did help. I would take it, and it would kind of just like push it away, it would become at ease. It made me kind of tired. So I didn't really like it because, you go to take it at work or something like that and you're just kind of dragging. So, it wasn't the greatest solution, but, and then I found myself, like, if I would get like a bad anxiety attack and stuff like that, like I would take more than I was supposed to try to knock it down. But all it was like prolonging it, because the second the medication wore off, it would come screaming back. So it was just a temporary solution for a more permanent problem. But I realized that there were a lot of things in my life that were giving me anxiety, the relationship I was in, and, being a new father and all that stuff. And, obviously my drinking at the time. So I just started like cutting those things out, and it's become a lot more manageable. So I went from having it numerous times a week to only having it maybe like once a week now, or sometimes not at all during the week. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things you could do. There's breathing exercises that you could focus on. The DBT book that I have as well, it has a lot of exercises in there that teach you about, focusing on different things in the room. You'll point out 3 things that are like this, 3 things are like this, 3 things are like this, and then you focus on them, and it's supposed to take your mind out of that place, where you're feeling like that. My best thing that I've learned is if I could somehow fall asleep, when I wake up, it's usually gone. So also, like, if I exercise, if I could push through the pain and stuff like that and exercise, like go for a run or lift weights or something like that, it'll come on really strong, and then it'll go away, and it'll almost feel like boom, 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 and then it kind of just relaxes at that point. So Stormy, I'll let you jump in if you want to talk a little bit about what's going on with that.
Yeah, I didn't really start having like severe anxiety, which included really bad panic attacks as well, until probably like year and a half ago. But when I look back, I think over my, lifetime, I probably had it building up, and just it was time for my body. My body was like, yeah, you're gonna have a panic attack. And they started getting more and more frequent, more and more severe, to the point where I did drive myself, when I was having a panic attack, to the emergency room. Like, that's how bad it was. Of course, I had gotten medication prescribed too. Zoloft helped in the beginning, but for me personally, it just made me feel like not myself. Yeah, it kept the panic attacks at bay. It helped with the anxiety, but like you said about the focusing on things, the breathing, distracting myself with other things really helps me. If I'm feeling like a panic attack coming on, like even today, I wasn't even sure if I was going to make the live because I got some stuff going on that's pretty heavy in my personal life, and yeah, I was feeling like I was going to have a panic attack. So it's kind of ironic that we're talking about this today. But I'm here because I feel like it needs to be talked about. I mean, it is a widely known disorder, but there's just so many elements to it. So I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting it out in the light and stuff like that, and making it be known, the problems that are going on and stuff like that. People don't always want to bring light to the things that might spite them in some sort of a way. So when you can actually, get that out there on the table and be open and honest about things, it can be a healing process. I mean, I've learned in my own personal thing and stuff like that, talking about like the BPD or anxiety or depression or whatever the case may be, not only does it help me to get it off of my chest, but it also, anyone watching and stuff, they get to talk about it too. They get to hear that they're not alone. They get to understand that there are other people out there suffering from the same exact thing, and that there is ways to get help for it. There always is. I mean, there's healthy ways to do it, and there's not healthy ways to do it. I would suggest not wasting your time going down the unhealthy avenue when you can, go down the more healthy way avenue that's going to help you in the long term. Because using things like drinking or prescription medication or whatever the case may be, it may be temporary, but eventually, it's going to catch up to you. Eventually, it's going to take a toll on you, physically and emotionally and mentally. So you want to be able to understand your body well. You want to be able to understand what makes you work and what, it's not going to be the same thing that everybody experiences, but, once you figure out what it is for you, then you can go from there, and you can certainly, find some solace in getting some help on the subject. So, some of the things that for someone who doesn't have anxiety and stuff like that, like some of the things that you're feeling as it's coming on, like an elevated heartbeat, you're sweating, you're feeling just nervous about something, you feel uneasy, uncomfortable. Like for me, like I have to get up, I have to move around. Like if I sit still, like I feel like I'm gonna like stop. Sometimes my eyes will get really heavy and I'll feel like I'm getting tired, but then like I'll like convince myself that if I like fall asleep that like something's gonna happen. So I like force myself to stay awake. So it goes back and forth, and just the thoughts in my head about everything that's going on is making me even more anxious. So, no matter what you do, it's just gonna keep beating on you. And especially if you surround yourself with people who make you anxious, like you put yourself in uncomfortable positions or situations, it's not going to help. It's not. Like for the longest time, I had a thing about being at people's houses or something like that maybe I didn't know or didn't feel comfortable around, so I would use things like alcohol and stuff like that to kind of take the edge off. And, with the edge being off and stuff like that, it made it more tolerable to be in situations that I didn't want to be in. So, but then again, one of the biggest contributors to having anxiety for me was the drinking. So it was like I was just postponing the inevitable. I may have been comfortable in the situation, but the next day when I woke up with a hangover, it was right there waiting for me. So it didn't exactly work out. But then when you become more comfortable in yourself and stuff, you can go to these situations without having to use that as a crutch, and, you're just more comfortable in your own skin. And I've learned that from like opening up about things and stuff like that. And then, surrounding myself with people who I know have my best interest in mind, like Stormy. And it's helped a lot. Obviously it's always a work in progress and stuff, but, the surroundings you put yourself in, the elements and stuff like that, it plays a big role. Like a big thing for me too was that, since I got out of the military in 2012, I've lived with roommates pretty much since then, whether it be friends or in a relationship or whatever the case may be. And even to this day, I still live with a roommate. But I've been in my current house now for 6 years. And in that time, I am on my 4th roommate. And the reason being is because my first roommate, me and her didn't get along. It was kind of like I need to get this house, I need someone to help me out kind of deal. So like, let's just throw you into the mix to make it happen. But, it gave me tremendous amount of anxiety because we had very different paths. She wanted to, have people over all the time and stuff like that. And I really wasn't about it. I was like, we're grown now. It's time to like move on with life and like be an adult. And she wasn't at that point in her life. So it ultimately ended. Then, my next roommate after that, it lasted for a couple of years. And then, he wanted to move out. He was going to go help his father because his father was very sick. So that's how that ended. And then my last roommate, who was one of my best friends at the time, things ended with him because he had a job. And he actually had the most extreme case of anxiety that I've probably ever seen. And what that was that it was like his first real job where he actually had to like go and be responsible and stuff like that. And, he's my age, in his 30s. And, he's going there, and because of COVID and stuff like that, everybody was like short staffed, and still to this day is, at least where I am. And he had to work all these extra hours, and, he was being, treated not in the greatest way and stuff at his job. I mean, granted, he was only working, a produce section at the grocery store, so it wasn't like an overwhelming amount of responsibilities or something like that, but it still frustrated him. And it was to the point, like, his biggest ticker was that when he sweat or something like that, like, you could see like it was just drenching him all the time, like, and that was just his way, with the panic attacks and stuff like that. And what he did to rectify that was that he smoked marijuana, and that seemed to help him. That seemed to get him out of his funk. And luckily for him, in New Jersey it is legal, so it wasn't like he was doing anything wrong. But, that was his biggest thing. But he wound up quitting the job And then he kind of just like he made so much money from working all the overtime and stuff, and he lived such a like a meaningless life, not meaningless, like he didn't need to spend a lot of money. You know what I mean? He didn't have a lot of overhead or anything like that, so he was able to secure about $20,000 in the 2 years that he worked there, and then he kind of just rode out the last year living off of the money he managed to save up. But he never left his room. And I tried to explain to him, I was like, I understand he also had BPD too. And I explained to him, I was like, listen, I was like, if you're not leaving your room and you're not talking to anybody other than me, you're kind of isolating yourself, and you're only going to make your depression and anxiety worse, because, human beings are creatures, like they're social creatures. So if you're not getting that social interaction or anything, and you are literally just locked in your room all day long and not leaving, I mean, you're only going to further add to it. And he wouldn't believe me. He was stuck in his ways as far as dealing with his depression and stuff. And it just progressively got worse. He got more complacent with being like that. He would get very irritable. Little things in life and stuff like that would get him to the point where he was just so upset, like he was freaking out. And he would actually like subconsciously find things to get pissed off about. I mean, when you're living with somebody like roommates and stuff, you want to have your life, they want to have their life. And, like me, like I like to have like trivia parties and stuff like that at my house, when I have nothing going on for the weekend. And, he would specifically sit up in his room. Now you got to imagine that his room is like 2 floors, or if we're down in the basement, that's 3 floors above where we're hanging out and making this noise. And he would specifically sit there and listen to hear what was going on and stuff like that, and create problems because he was just so upset with his own life. And then I would think to myself, like, am I doing something wrong by like living my life and doing the things that I want to do? Because I feel like I'm not, like, the house isn't getting destroyed, nobody's doing anything, like we're just kind of hanging out and like doing trivia and listening to music. Like, is it really that big of a deal? Is it really that big of a deal to be sitting there and, trying to have a life? Or is it just that you have your own depression and stuff like that, and, this is how you're dealing with it? You're sitting there and you're nitpicking, being frustrated.
Yeah, I just want to add something about that, because I was good friends with him as well during all of this, and it's just like he would bring me for sure into a lot of stuff and cause me anxiety and stress, and because that's what he was dealing with. And yeah, he had a whole plethora of depression, anxiety, the BPD, like, was just it was rough. And I know it was rough for you. It certainly was rough for me. So I don't know. I guess everybody deals with things differently, and that's how he chose to deal with it.
Yep. And I've known him for a good portion of my life and stuff like that. And then obviously, I've known Stormy about 6 years, and Stormy got to meet him not only through me, but also through the game we all played together, Marvel Strike Force, and we were all in an alliance where we would talk like through Discord and stuff like that. And like, she knew that he was like one of my closest friends, so she also became friends with him and stuff like that. And they developed a bond. Like, they became very good friends. But then what wound up happening was, for whatever reason, the things I would do in my life and stuff like that, maybe he thought that they would like upset Stormy in some way or another, and he would just go run and start telling her things just to create drama, or in borderline technology or terminology, splitting. He would be splitting. He would be creating inner conflicts and stuff like that, and starting drama just subconsciously, whether he knew that he was actively doing it or not. That's up for debate, but he was doing it, and it was creating a lot of rifts. And like, you could tell over the years and stuff like that, not only did that destroy our friendship, me and him, but it also created a lot of problems with me and Stormy too, because if you're going out there specifically to start problems with malicious intent, that's not right. That shouldn't be rewarded. That shouldn't be, especially if you care about somebody, if you're sitting there saying like your brothers, like, you guys are that close, and you're going and starting problems just because you're trying to fulfill something in your own life or something. I never really understood that. And it became so toxic in the house that I said, enough is enough. Like, I can't deal with this anymore. As much as like was one of my best friends, like, I can't live like this. It's just like you feel this overwhelming stress just in the house, even if he is like stuck up in his room, like, and you don't see him or anything like that. It's just, it's in the house. When he comes walking down or something like that to go get something from like the kitchen, like you don't want to run into him just because like it's so overbearing. And I mean, nobody should live like that, especially like if it's not even his house, like it's my house. Like, I shouldn't have to live like that. Like, what did I, why am I working and doing all this stuff for if like there's this tremendous, stuff in the house that's just bringing me down? So, it didn't wind up working out. And like, that's when I had suggested to him, I was like, listen, I think for both of our mental health, I think it's time that, you figure it out and you go. Like, he'd lived with me almost 3 years. I was just like, time's up, man. Like, I can't do this. You've refused to go to work. You're not taking care of yourself. You had like a mouth infection that like you could smell when he talked and stuff. Like, he was just falling apart. And like, I've tried so many times to get him a different job and like be there for him and like talk to him and stuff, but I was just always met with resistance or, stupid things. I get him to go out. My anxiety's too bad. I can't go out. I'd ask him to play a video game. Oh, my anxiety's too bad. I can't do it. Like there was just no helping him. And, I'm saddened by it because, I only wish the best, but, unfortunately, it's just not how it turned out. And, I wish him well. I hope he's doing good. I hope he, figured it out and stuff like that. But, I mean, you never know. But it was good for both of us to take a step back and walk away from it and just be like, yeah, it's not working out. And it just so happened that my current roommate was going through a divorce. So as he left, you know what I mean? It just switched. Steve said that he'd be joining us at some point in the future for our live chats and stuff like that, to give his take on different things as we go through it. But as for the anxiety and stuff like that, a lot of it has to do with your surroundings. So if you put yourself in good surroundings, then you're taking a lot of that pressure off of you. If you're putting yourself around good people that you're comfortable with and stuff like that, you're taking a lot of that stress off. But if you're hanging out with somebody that makes you feel uncomfortable, you're never going to have a good time because you're sitting there and you're just constantly worrying like about this person being there. So, you got to take it in stride and just make sure that, you're doing what's best for you in the moment, in the future, like everything included. So with that being said, that's the take on anxiety. Like I said, if you think that you have anxiety or anything like that, it's just a Google away to check it out. But also, you could talk to your primary physician and see if there is medication or anything that would help you. Because, maybe because it didn't work for me, maybe it doesn't mean it's not going to work for you. Everybody has different things that go along with it. So, again, it's on a case-by-case basis. And like I always say in all my things, I'm not like a licensed professional or anything like that. I'm just giving my opinions, and like Stormy as well, just giving opinions on dealing with it in everyday life. So Stormy's going to jump on. She's going to give you the definition of depression because that's our next part.
Okay, depression is a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Fortunately, it is also treatable. Depression causes feelings of sadness and or a loss of interest in activities you once enjoyed. It can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems and can decrease your ability to function at work or at home. Symptoms, mild to severe, can include feeling sad or having a depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in activities once enjoyed, changes in appetite, weight loss or gain unrelated to dieting, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy or increased fatigue, increase in purposeless physical activity, inability to sit still, pacing, hand wringing, or slowed movements or speech. Those actions must be severe enough to be observed by others, feeling worthless or guilty, difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions, thoughts of death or suicide.
Yep. And, there's a difference between feeling down and then like chronic depression. You know what I mean? Like everybody gets the blues. It's normal. You go through breakups or things in life aren't going the way you planned or anything like that. Everybody's going to get the blues. But if you're consistently being depressed, you know what I mean? You have to. Are you going to say something, Stormy? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, add that, most of the time for even diagnosis of depression, they're saying like minimum of 2 weeks of it, continuing or being the same and not changing. to get a diagnosis of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, like that's the difference between the blues and chronic depression. You know what I mean? Like you could have had a bad day at work, and you come home from work, and you're just like, man, like I had such a hard day, and like I feel down and stuff like that, and it could last the day. But it's different than having like real depression. I mean, depression just lasts, and for me personally, it's like this overwhelming like cloud that's just following you. You can't seem to shake it. And sometimes, you know what I mean, it's hard to tell the difference between whether it's a BPD symptom, because it does go along with it, or if it's just like something that's going on in life. But when it comes over me and stuff like that, I wind up just shutting down. And sometimes it just happens abruptly. Like nothing could be happening at all, and then just boom, I'm just thrown into it. And then like I just feel tired. I just want to sleep. I don't want to like lack of motivation. I don't want to be at work, or I don't even want to play a video game. I kind of just like want to watch TV and just like kind of like sit and sulk in it until it passes, and I mean, there's certain things that I have found that kind of like pull me out of that and stuff like that. So like for me, like seeing my child, like that pulls me out of it. Like I'll see her and then I'll just be like, boom, like the happiness comes rushing back. And that's just like an uplifting thing for me. But then there's other things that are depressing, like, when I'm having a hard day at work, or financially or something like that, when I'm living paycheck to paycheck and I'm thinking like, how am I going to make next week? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Or, issues with like family or friends or anything like that. It's a tremendous weight. And, especially with, like I said, we've talked about in the past couple of weeks, like borderline and stuff like that, especially when you have borderline, that depression, you're feeling emotions a lot more extreme than you normally would feel, like a normal person would feel. So, to feel that type of depression, it's just like, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. It's not a joking matter whatsoever. And, it's weird to be in a situation where, you go from being like completely normal, everything's going good with your day, and then just boom. And it seems like the world's falling around you. And I mean, there was a time when I was in the military. So when I was in the military, I didn't like the lifestyle. I wasn't about it. I kind of just did it because, at the time I was partying and stuff like that. And then I didn't really have any direction. I was going to school for like auto mechanics, but I didn't really like it. And I didn't see myself being stuck under a car for the rest of my life. Like it just didn't seem like it was something that I wanted to do. I was more into like art and, creating things and stuff. So I didn't really have a direction. So I was going to drop out of, auto mechanic school at Lincoln Tech. And, my dad told me at the time, he was just like, listen, like if you're dropping out, you better have a plan. And you better have a way to like pay for this and take care of this. And like, you're not just going to sit around. So at the time, I had a friend who I grew up with my entire life. He had already been in the Navy for an entire year. And he had told me, he was like, hey man, like join the Navy. You're going to see the world. Like, the typical crap that the recruiters shove down your throat. It's going to be awesome. And then you'll get the GI Bill and you'll be able to do whatever you want when you get out. But it's not exactly that, at least in my experience. Maybe it is for some people. I didn't see that side of the Navy. I remember distinctly, because that's when I really started noticing my depression. I'd never been away from home at that point in my life. Like I always lived with just my dad. So to finally be away, I actually like tried to sabotage myself. And what it was that I started getting second thoughts about doing this. And we were going to stay in a hotel room the night prior to us getting on the plane and stuff like that. And one of the guys I was with and stuff like that, he was from the area, because they took us down towards New York City, which is about like an hour and change from where I live. And went down there, and he went out. He was like, I'm going to go party with my friends and stuff like that. Like, you should come with me. And I was just like, okay. So I went partying with them and stuff in the hopes that I would actually get in trouble so they would prevent me from going, because I was so nervous about going. But it didn't wind up working out that way, and I actually wound up going to my first days of boot camp like kind of hungover and exhausted and stuff. So, I remember being in there, and it's a whole change of life. Like from when you go to the airport, we landed in O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and they bust us out to Great Lakes, and you know, while we were out there on the bus, they show you this video about like what to expect, your new life and all this stuff. So, you know, it's kind of nerve wracking. You're looking around, everybody else is nervous too. They don't know what's going on. You get there and immediately you start getting screamed at, you know, telling you to do this, that you say the wrong thing, you know, they're right in your face, like letting you know, you have to call home and let them know that you made it safe. So I remember calling my dad. It was pretty late at night, and I called him, and I was just like I'm safe and stuff like that. I couldn't really go into it. I was just like, oh, hi, I'm safe. I gotta go. Bye. Hang up the phone. And then it really started to sink in, that this is life now. And you go through something called P days, and during P days, you're getting all your shots and immunizations. They're checking your records and all that stuff. So I remember walking down this like hallway, and on each side they had people with, like shots. So they hit you on both your arms. And as you went down, then when you got to the end, they told you like, all right, drop your pants. Like, we're going to give you one in your cheek. So they give you what they call the peanut butter shot. And it's like some sort of like penicillin or something like that. It's supposed to bring out any like ailments or illnesses that you might've been carrying that were going to come along. And I wound up getting really sick because I am allergic to penicillin, first of all, which I lied about because I wanted to get in and I didn't want that to disqualify me. So I was standing in line because they were going to do the dental part of it because, they want to pull your wisdom teeth and stuff like that. So that way, it's not a problem that comes on later. Like maybe you're on a ship or something like that. Now you're having a wisdom tooth problem. They can't really service it. But if they take them out, you don't have that problem. So I'm standing in line and I just remember I collapsed. So I actually was in bed for a couple of days because I had just a spike and a fever and stuff. And, but I even had regrets about going through it with boot camp because there was a point, I think it was a couple weeks into it, because boot camp was 6 weeks long because we were what was called a push division. So they were trying to push us through instead of the 8 weeks. So I was feeling down and depressed about it. And like me and another guy were, and we actually went up to the RDC or the drill sergeant, whatever you prefer to call them. In the Navy, we call them RDCs. So went up to the RDC and spoke to him and said, listen, like, this isn't for me. I don't want to do this. Like, let me out before this turns real. Like, I know it's boot camp and like, we're kind of here, but like, can I get the hell out? And they convince you like, no, you can't get out. There's no quitting. You can't get out. Even if you quit or anything like that, you'll never even get a job at McDonald's or anything like that. Like, because everyone's pro-military. So you signed up for this, you're doing it. And they were really convincing, and, obviously I wound up, sticking it out and, I graduated boot camp and stuff like that. But then, that's when like the loneliness really, really set in because I didn't know anybody. I got stationed across the street from where boot camp was at like the Great Lakes actual base. And I was there for, I think like four or 5 months. And in that time, it's not only is it like kind of depressing living where you work, because I was underage and I wasn't married at the time, so I couldn't live off a base. So, you have to like earn your freedom. You get like these little cards and it's like, I get to stay out overnight or I get to leave base. Like, and you actually have to like do good at your job to have just basic freedoms at that point. And, you're packed in a room at that. I was stationed on that base and I had like 4 other roommates with me at the time. And, everybody seems to be going through the same crap. They're usually around like your age and stuff. So, they're away from home for their first time. They're experiencing it. And just that overwhelming sadness, especially with me, like I was talking to a girl from back home and I was trying to like have a relationship with her, like long distance and stuff. And it just wasn't working. And like I was in too many places at once and I wasn't focusing on what I needed to do. And it just made the depression so much worse. So I found that, my best course was writing. So like I have a journal that's from that time that I would write in it and stuff like that I could always like talk about and read back and stuff. So that helped me get through it. And then I wound up getting orders to go to San Diego. So I was excited about that. Great Lakes was kind of a depressing place. It was either really hot there or like the snow was above your head, because we were like right on the Great Lakes. So it was a lot to deal with. And, in that depression, and this is what my point was going to be, when I was in the base at Great Lakes, there was actually one of my roommates. I didn't really know him very well. I only hung out with like one of my like 4 other roommates, but we all shared like a split room. There was like 3 people were on one side, 2 people on the other side, and we shared like a kitchen and bathroom and stuff. So me and one of my roommates, we were playing, I think it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 just came out. We were playing that, and we got a knock on the door, and it was somebody, asking us, they're like, "Oh, is this so and so's room?" And we were like, "Yeah, why?" And then they were like, "All right, bring him in." So they start carrying him in. It's like three guys carrying this drunk guy into the room. And when they bring him into the room, they're like trying to put him to bed. I guess he had been drinking, and they're explaining the story to us. And basically what they had said was that this guy was sleeping with one of the higher ups' wife, and she was cheating. And I guess she had become pregnant, and she had said to him, like, "This isn't your kid. I want nothing to do with you. This is my husband's kid. Like, I'm going back to him." So he wound up getting obscenely drunk to deal with it. So they had to carry him back to the dorm room. And when they brought him back, we had a bunch of idiots dealing with him. People who clearly have never dealt with a drunk person before, especially someone who's upset, because they're trying to hold him down. Granted, it's a thin, like green, like dark, like throw up looking green carpet over cement. And they're holding him down on this, and they're trying to force water down his throat. And he's obviously getting upset, as anyone would in that situation, drunk or sober. So he's trying to get them off of them. We're trying to explain to him, like, leave the guy alone. Like, if he's drunk or whatever, like, we'll let him go to sleep, and then we'll deal with it. Like, just leave him alone. They wouldn't do it, so they told the rover, which is the guy who walks around, like, the berthing and stuff like that, to make sure everything's going okay. They're like, go get somebody important and stuff. So he's sitting there, and we're trying to deal with him, and, he's getting upset. They're taunting him and stuff. I guess he had an issue with the guy who came in the room that they went to go seek. He started saying some, like, really nasty remarks to them, which prompted them to say, "All right, we've had enough of this guy. Somebody call the Great Lakes Police Department." So they get on the phone to go call him. Meanwhile, my roommate at the time, he was very upset. He actually wound up taking a DVD that I borrowed from somebody, and he broke it because they let him up. He broke it, and he was sitting there, and he was holding one of the broken CDs to his throat and the other one out like this, like, "Don't come near me or I'll cut you." Within that depression, they managed to actually, like, get him into the police, they just came barging in because they saw him with this. They grabbed him, they threw him into the wall, they kind of like put him onto the ground, they slammed his face into the ground, so they busted up his face. He was bleeding everywhere. Then after they had cuffed him, they brought him into the kitchen. I mean, we're all sitting there watching this, just like, wow. And they bring him into the kitchen, they pull us onto the hallway because they want statements and stuff. When the medical examiners came in to put him on the stretcher and stuff, like the paramedics, I guess the police officer who had originally slammed him and stuff like that also walked back into the room. So my roommate was on the ground. He was like, they saw them taking pictures. Like, "Oh, you want to show?" And he spit a mouthful of blood actually at the police officer. So right then and there, he's getting charged with assault on an officer with hazardous material. So, at that point, they got him onto the stretcher and stuff, and like they had him completely bound, and they took him out of there. And, there was blood everywhere. I mean, all over the room and stuff. So they couldn't let us sleep there anymore. It was become a hazardous thing. So we all got disbanded and have to go into different rooms. But, the next day when we were in the building, we saw him come back in, and he had full shackles on, like on his arms all the way down to his ankles. And he had to come back in and retrieve his stuff because they were going to be sending him to the brig. And he was at the end of his career. And to have to go into the brig at that point, you know what I mean? It's not like a joking matter. And I mean, to see like depression and like that, I mean, that in itself made me even more depressed because now I'm with new people that I don't know. And, I had a couple strange roommates along the way, and it was just bad. So the way I dealt with it, I would go out and I would drink on the weekends and stuff like that, like, and try to take my mind off it, but it didn't really help. And it was just times like that just kept happening and happening. And, you surround yourself with people that feel the same way, and they're also depressed and they're also going through it. So, you're trying to be there for each other, but at the same time, you're also bringing each other down. And my experience in the military was that, the people that I was around and stuff like that, they didn't care about your well-being. That's not to say like the instructors or anything. I'm talking about like the people I actually served with. They didn't really care about your well-being. They were kind of just there for their own agenda and stuff like that. And I wound up getting screwed over a lot in my service time, by the people I surrounded myself with. And it ultimately is what pushed my career into where it went, when I got diagnosed with borderline, and, so it was a tough life. And honestly, even after I got out, I was still having nightmares and stuff like that on a pretty regular basis about like, oh my God, I woke up and I'm still on base. Like me getting out, that was just a dream. Like it never happened like that. So, that was probably that. And then my relationship with my child's mother were the two most depressing things I would say that happened in my life. And I mean, they were both very tough in different ways. They were both things that scarred me in different ways, and they're both things that still, every once in a while, like come up. Not nearly as bad as how they used to be when it was still fresh. Because I mean, you're talking the military was 11 years ago, and then you're talking that relationship was about 7 years ago, so almost 8 years ago. So there are things that really don't come up as much anymore. But the depression, like I didn't want to do anything. I was constantly like drinking to deal with it, like, and I didn't understand at the time that it was hurting everybody around me, and it was making me act more irrational. So, Stormy, do you want to jump on and give your thoughts on depression?
I have been very fortunate to really have not suffered from, depression. I don't know if it's just, my environment, hereditary. I mean, of course, I've been sad. I've, dealt with a lot of traumatic things, but I've been very fortunate not to have really had deep, deep depression that's been reoccurring throughout my life. Of course, I know a lot of people and family, friends, that deal with it sometimes on a daily basis. And it's very reoccurring as well. So I've watched them have to go through that, and it's pretty traumatic for someone to deal with that on a daily basis or a regular basis even. So my hat's off to people that have to deal with that and live with that, because I'm pretty much lucky that in a way that I just have the anxiety and the panic attacks versus add other stuff with it. I mean, when you got like 2 or 3 things happening at one time, I can only imagine how rough that is for people to deal with.
And it is. I mean, and not only is it tough to deal with, but there was like other things involved with it as well. So one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that there's certain triggers for me and stuff like that that'll put me in a depressive mood. For example, whether it be there's physical objects that I've found that put me in it. There's also, situations. So I'll go into both. So like situational depression for me is like most of the time when I have to deal with my child's mother. It almost always is going to put me in a depressive state because it's never a good communication. Maybe not like 100% of the, like I would say 95% of the time, it's not a positive communication. So unfortunately, that usually sends me into a state of anxiety and also depression, because no matter what I say, it never gets through. And I'm always just looked at like your opinion doesn't matter. So that's one thing. That's a situational thing that I would say, comes up frequently that could put me in that. But I've learned different things, and we talked about it in one of our prior videos. I have specific ringtones set to certain people. Now, when I hear that ringtone go off, like with their text message or their phone call or something like that, then it'll go off and I'll know automatically in my pocket who is texting me or who's calling me. And with that being said, I can kind of prepare myself before I even look at it like, okay, so this right here is like what I have to deal with. Like, take it time. So like my exes always have the same ringtone, even like I would say probably for the past 7 or 8 years. So when I hear that ringtone going off, I automatically know like, okay, like breathe. We're going to get through this. Like it's probably something stupid. Just like be done with it. So that has helped me in situational stuff. Another thing that like kind of bothers me situation wise is like, if I feel like I'm not being heard or I'm not being listened to, that's a situational thing that I need to like remove myself from, because then, I could become confrontational or anything like that. And that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is that everybody's happy and everybody gets to, go home every day, be with their family, and you don't have to deal with like any unnecessary crap. So for me, I try my best to avoid situations until like I have no anxiety or depression, and I can look at it from a clear state of mind and say, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with this. I sit down, I think about it like for a day or so, and I'm like, okay, and this is what I'm going to say, especially if it's something important. So that's what I'll do. Then there's certain things like I was just talking about. There's physical objects for like depression. So for me, like the physical objects would be like my journals. If I sit down and I read my journals, sometimes they will conjure it up. And one of my side projects, because, for anyone that's new, I'm an author. I've published 2 books now. My first book being The Souls of Paradise, Souls of Paradise, Family is Forever. And my second one is Paradise Reborn. I have it over there. But one of my side projects that I want to work on one day is I want to talk about, my situations with the child custody court and talk about, in my opinion, not obviously universal, but how the court looked at me with mental illness, but also obviously being a father as well, and how that all played out to be. So that is a side project that I'm working on. But in order to do that, I have to get myself into a situation where I have to reread my journals and stuff like that to make sure the story all flows and that it's all good. But I know for a fact that if I read those things, that it's probably going to put me into a state which I don't want to be in. And I've managed to stay away from those types of things, and like my life has been so much better by not doing those. But it is something that I do want to do because I feel like I owe it to myself after the years of hell I went through with that to actually put it to paper. And even if I never publish it, just to put it to paper and do something about that, because I kept avid notes throughout that entire time. So it would be something, I'd want to put it basically as a collection. And at that point I would decide, whether that was like something that I wanted to air out, like my personal business. But there's also something else, and a little bit of background story before I show you this. So my mom left when I was very young. I was about 2 years old when my mom started seeing somebody else, and she was cheating on my dad, and she actually wound up leaving him, and me for that matter as well. She didn't want to be a mom, whatever the case may be. That's where they say the borderline stem from. I don't know for sure. These things just happen, I guess, but that's where it started with. Now, there was always this story that was going around when I was growing up that my mom kind of left a piece of paper or whatever, and it was like her saying she didn't want me. So I never saw it. I would always ask about it, but I never saw it. And then I would constantly ask my dad. But my dad was one of those people that wouldn't talk about it. He didn't want to talk about my mom. He didn't want to put her down. He didn't like anything like that. It's not because he liked her or anything. It's just because he didn't want me growing up, with him bashing her. Whereas to the opposite happened when I went to her house. She wouldn't shut the hell up about him. I mean, from the moment I walked in the door, she would be relentless about how much of a piece of shit she thought he was. And it's unfortunate because it actually wound up being one of the factors that made me resent her. So it's well, I don't get to see you that much, and the time we're spending together, this is what you're going to act like? I mean, from the moment I walk in the door, it's oh, those are your father's clothes, you need to take them off immediately. Oh, hi to you too. She had a lot of issues and stuff. But one of the things, when I turned 21 and I came home when I was on leave from the Navy, my dad was having a couple of drinks with me and stuff like that, and I convinced him to finally show me this thing. And it actually did exist. And I couldn't believe it. I could believe it because so many people told me it was true. So at that time you're kind of yeah, all right, it is true. But, to see it, the thing is, it felt like any Harry Potter fans out there and stuff like that, the Horcruxes. Whenever, in the Deathly Hallows Part 1, when they're wearing that necklace, it's making them have these bad thoughts and making them feel some sort of way and stuff. When I held that in my hand, that's exactly what it felt like. It felt wow, this piece of paper is my entire history and stuff like that. This is where all my issues and stuff, according to, the doctors in court and stuff, this is where it all stemmed from. This single piece of paper. And in a way, it's depressing, and it's it's terrible to think that somebody, especially that gave birth to you, would do that. But just to know that just a single piece of paper could hold so much weight, it was just unbelievable. So my dad wound up putting it away and stuff like that. So he moved actually last year, and earlier this year. He moved in June, and he was going, packing his house up, and he was moving to South Carolina and stuff like that. And during that time, I told him, I was I just want one thing from you. And he already knew what I was going to ask him for, because he had it pretty ready. And this is it. And I mean, you could see clear as day, You know, I was the number one thing that he could have. I mean, she was taking literally like all this unnecessary crap over me. And he didn't want me to take it. He wanted to burn it. He wanted to just be done with it. He wanted to put it in the past and wanted nothing to do with it. But I felt like that I wanted it, and he couldn't understand why. So I explained it to him. I said, just like I said just before, to hold something that has that much weight, that can literally control my emotions just with like that one little tiny tidbit, that is something of extreme power. And I felt like it was my birthright to who I became. And that was not something that I wanted him to destroy, because it was never his. It was mine. Because it's me. And, you know, I haven't had a relationship with her since January 2012 was the last time I saw her. And, you know, she decided to have her little moment of clarity when she was arguing with me about my dad owing child support, or her owing my dad child support. And I told her that I would just pay it, because she kept trying to take him to court. And it was just embarrassing watching her, because she may have overpaid child support, but she owed money for my college. So he kind of just like moved one to the other. So she just looked like an idiot and was wasting so much money. So to prevent her from doing so, I was making good money at the time. I said, I will go and pay it for you. She's like, no, Nicholas, that's not the problem. And she's the only person in my entire life that calls me that, and I can't stand it. But, you know, she said that to me, and I was like, okay, like, you know, she went on to a tirade. She's like, you know, I wish I'd never met your father. So I stopped, and I was just like, okay, well, if you never met him, you wouldn't have had me. So you can't exactly say that. I was like, so, you know, unless you are saying that you wish you never had me. And she goes, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's like, well, yeah, it kind of is. And then she looked me dead in the face and was just like, no, it is what I'm saying. I was just like, oh, okay. I was like, well, don't call me ever again. I want nothing to do with you, and see you later. And I regretted it. And that's another thing with depression, why I was going on this rant. Like it was another thing that was constantly weighing on me and beating on me, that I never got that closure. And like, you know, somebody like her to say that to me, like, you know, she was always a piece of shit. Like there was nothing new about that, but for her to say something like that, you know what I mean? Like it was like, wow. And I didn't get to say my piece, you know, because I still looked at her as like my mom. You know, you're not going to talk back to your parents. You're not going to say anything like swearing at them and stuff like that. So, you know, it always ate at me. And then when I went through my custody battle and stuff, after that, you know, I wound up being depressed because I had lost when I had no reason to lose. And, you know, they just sat there and they blamed it on the borderline. Now, granted, this was back in 2021, and, you know, I had no idea how I was going to handle that. No idea at all. And I remember that day when it finally concluded, I was just like at a loss of words. And I was actually supposed to have my daughter that night, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. I knew I was going to be depressed, and I didn't want her to be around that. So I did the responsible thing. I reached out to her mother and I said, you know, can you take her a day early? I'm dealing with a lot right now, and I don't think she should see that. She gave me a hard time about it, because I would assume she probably went out to celebrate, but, you know, she did eventually take her. And then I was just like crying for like 3 days. Like I couldn't deal with it. I felt like I had lost everything good in my life at that point. And it just kept eating at me. It kept beating me and beating me. And every week it was just harder and harder to go, because I went from having her basically like full time when I left to just having it diminished for nothing that I did. I didn't do anything wrong. It was just someone's opinion, a person who's a bystander. You know what I mean? It's not like the judge really knew anything outside of like the 3 days of testimony. I went through 3 different judges in my 4 years of court. So it's not like she was there even the whole ride. She was only there the last few months. So to have some like a bipartisan like that make such a colossal decision, like it didn't sit very well with me. And there was like no contesting it. There was no nothing. So, you know, I was depressed about it. And then, like I said, I hadn't spoken to her since January of 12. So, I mean, it had been almost 10 years. And I called my grandmother up because they kept blaming it on the BPD. And then they're saying the BPD came because of that note. So, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I'm like, you know, I really want to get this off my chest. So one night I had a couple drinks, and I said to my grandmother, I was like, I really need, you know, my mom's number. And she was hesitant. She didn't really want to give it to me because she kind of knew like what was going on. But she actually did. And I sat there for a couple minutes, and I was thinking about it, and I was just like, should I do it? Like, am I really in the right state of mind to be doing that? And even if I do, what is it really going to be like accomplishing? But I said, screw it, and I did it anyway. And I wound up calling her, and on the phone call and stuff like that, I let her have it. I took everything that I've been building up inside of me for years, and I just absolutely blasted her with it. And it felt so good. If I could do it again, I would absolutely do it again. Because I sat there for so many years with that weight on me. When you have one of your parents that clearly just doesn't want you or to be a part of your life, they don't give a shit about anything you do. I mean, it's constantly something that's going to keep going over in your head. You're going to be like, what did I do wrong? You gave birth to me. You did. You made me. I'm an image of you. And you don't want to be a part of that? How fucked up is that? So to be able to actually just let loose and be like, you know what? These are all the things I regret about you. These are all the things that you missed out on. And I even told her too. I was like, I said, my greatest gift to you, and it's going to sound fucked up, but you have to understand the relationship we had. It was a very screwed up relationship. But at that time I said to her, I was like, the greatest gift that I can give you is that you have a super intelligent granddaughter right now who you've never met, never asked about, never sent a birthday card, never gave a shit about. But she exists. She's alive. And my greatest gift to you is that you'll never fucking know her. You'll never get to meet her. And you got to take that to your grave. And then that right there in itself is payback for all the bullshit you put me through my entire life. But that's where I was wrong. Because it didn't bother her. You can't threaten somebody with something like that because it doesn't bother them. They never gave a shit to begin with, so why would they start caring now? But in the moment, it felt good for me. I got it off my chest. I felt a lot better about myself, and it was a huge weight lifted. And it actually helped a lot with my own depression because I wasn't carrying around that burden about what I should have said anymore. I got it off my chest. I put it out there. I made it be known that this is probably one of the last times we're ever going to talk to each other, but just so you know, this is what I've been saving up for you for so many years of your bullshit. And it helped. It gave me closure. And a lot of the times, you need that, especially if you have a bad breakup or something like that. It's always best to have some sort of closure and be done with it, to put it to rest so you're not constantly carrying this weight. Because like we said last week, hate is baggage. Life's too short to be carrying around all this baggage and crap. Get it out, get it done with. Even if it hurts in the moment, it's only going to be temporary as opposed to carrying that weight, which could be more permanent. And that's the biggest thing. Talking about your depression or going to get medication for it if you need it in certain circumstances is the best way to deal with it, to go to therapy, get it out there, or, be honest with yourself and honest with the people around you. That's how you're going to get help. If you just internalize it, or you do things like self-harm, or you use substances to mask it and hide it and stuff, it's not going to get any better. It's only just going to keep putting you in a worse state of mind. So, we always invite everybody, as we're coming to a close on our live stream and stuff, we always invite everybody to reach out to us. If you ever need to talk about anything, whether it be myself or Stormy or anything like that, we're always here to listen. And I'm grateful to the people who have reached out to me. I actually had a couple of people reach out to me over this past weekend telling me that they bought the book and they really liked it. And, we got a couple new reviews on Amazon that Stormy showed me last week. I'm so happy that you guys are enjoying it. We actually are 21 sales away from hitting 100 copies in a year, which I didn't even think I would even remotely come close to. But, it's a huge thing. And thank you guys so much for the support on that. And if you haven't checked it out, like we always say, you can go on Amazon and you can get the Kindle version for 99 cents. Like I said, I'm not doing it to make profit. I enjoyed the work, and the people who read it really enjoyed it. So I wanted it to be publicly available to anybody who wanted to see it. So, go check it out. Like I said, The Souls of Paradise, and the other one is Paradise Reborn. I'm working on Paradise Eternal right now, which will be the close to that series. I just finished the second chapter last week, and I started working on the third chapter a little bit. As I come up with more information, stuff like that, obviously I will post teasers and stuff, and we could talk about it more. This Thursday, we're actually going to be doing more chapters, because Thursday nights, if you're new to watching us, we go through the first book, 2 chapters at a time. I think we might bump it up to 3 chapters because these chapters are kind of smaller than the other book. I want to dive into that book to get through this one. So we may jump into 3 chapters this week as a special thing to move forward. And I basically give insight to what the chapter's about, and then also talk about like the Easter eggs and stuff. What helped me come up with these ideas? What helped me create these characters, or whatever the case may be? So anyone who is a fan of reading or is new to reading it and wants to read along, Thursday night, I think we're going to start pushing the live times. I think we're going to push them to 8 o'clock. So I believe starting Thursday, that's what we're going to do. We're going to push it to 8, and then we'll do, a half hour to an hour. Usually our healings are the ones that's an hour, just like today. So to bring it to close, tonight we talked about anxiety and depression and, how it feels for each of us, and, things you can do in a creative way to deal with it and stuff. And, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in and, being here with us for our healing chat. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys and stuff. And I'll let Stormy close it out before I say mine.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Appreciate it. Join us on Thursday.
Yep. So thank you guys so much for tuning in with us, and I will see you guys on Thursday. Have a good night.